Hello, everybody. It is Sunday afternoon where we are. Welcome to a very, very special Literarily Wasted live stream. We've got Victoria V.E. Schwab waiting for a Q&A, but first we want to give a very, very special thanks to our sponsor for this event, Rocky Heights Print and Binding. Check them out. If you are an aspiring author and you're looking to self-publish, they can help you in a number of ways. They have a lot of services. So again, thank you to Rocky Heights Print and Binding for sponsoring this event. They're awesome. Check them out if you want to self-publish your book. That being said, we should dive right in to this Q&A. So without further ado, oh no, I haven't even drank anything.
So much to do. Hurry
up. Introduce the award-winning,
why we're all here,
best-selling New York Times best-selling author Victoria V.E. Schwab. Welcome. There she is.
Hi. Thank you. I kept waiting for you to be like, welcome, it is August 2nd, this like fine Sunday. I felt like it was a journal entry in the making.
Oh, she did it. That was beautiful.
It is August 2nd. And if you don't get that, then you should tune into our live streams more often, and I'll make way more typos. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a bunch of people in the comments waiting to ask you their questions. But,
oh my goodness, that's a lot already.
There are. So we will go ahead and get started. I'm just going to throw a softball at you real quick, just to grease the wheels. Tell us about so in our club we have read Vicious and we've read A Darker Shade of Magic. And so tell us about your inspirations for each of those, if you could.
Of course. Yeah, so I like to treat books as like a meal that I'm trying to assemble. And that means for my creative process, I'm usually collecting ingredients over a period of time. Like the story doesn't pop into my head wholesale. It's usually 1 to 2 years of me being like, that is a cool ingredient. I don't know what to do with it. I'll put it in the pot. Like, that is a cool ingredient. And at some point, I gather the ingredient that makes the meal cohesive, the thing that brings the dish together. And so a solid 1.5 years before I started writing A Darker Shade of Magic, I got this image in my head, this ingredient, if you will, of a young man walking through a wall and colliding with a girl dressed as a boy. And I had no idea. I had nothing else in that, except it was like the image was in black and white and his coat was in red. And they were both covered in blood, which is par for the course in most of my stories. And so, but I had no story for it, right? So I put it away and I went about my life. And about 6 months later, I was thinking about the fact of how much I loved things like Full Metal Alchemist and Avatar: The Last Airbender, and how much I love elemental magic. And I was starting to think about also wanting to write a multi-world story. But the thing I don't like about multi-world stories is that they require maps. And I have this weird grievance with maps and glossaries in that, like, if you need either one, it feels info dumpy to me personally. Like, I feel like you should be able to get that information in context. So I started thinking to myself, if I wrote a fantasy with multiple worlds, how would I do it so that you didn't need this gross quantity of information? And I thought I would make it so that they were different iterations of the same world. And all of these things are coalescing in my head. And then I start thinking, well, okay, back to the man walking through the wall, colliding with the girl dressed as a boy. What if he wasn't walking through a wall? What if he was walking through a world? What does that mean? And that's that collision point at which everything starts Rubik's cubing into place. And I start playing with the story. Vicious was totally different because Vicious was never going to get published. I wrote Vicious because I fell out of love with writing. I was having a really terrible publishing journey. I was 25 and I was about to quit because I started at like 20, and which we can talk about. It was very different, but I just was miserable. I couldn't find joy in the process anymore. And so on the back burner, in between other deadlines, I started cheating. I started having an affair with an idea. And because no one was ever going to see this idea, I didn't care what it was. I got to make it whatever I wanted. And all I wanted was to write a story without heroes. I wanted to see if I could write a story that was full of bad people and still make the reader care about them. So it became like a creative exercise to see if I could do that and what would it take. And that's what the seed of Vicious was. It took 3 years to write. I didn't even tell my agent I had written it until it was finished. She had no idea what to do with it. Even when Tor bought it, they were like, superheroes don't sell outside of comics. No one, like, no one's going to read it, but we're investing in your future. So, like, that is a story that was just the dark insides of my body put onto paper, and I never expected anyone else to read it. So I was gleeful and just unrestrained in that story. But it was the first, I will say, it was the first book that taught me the really hard lesson of publishing, which is that you will never be able to guarantee your own success. You will never be able to control how the cogs work. All you can control is how much you love the thing that you're working on. And it's that, like, through specificity, you find universality. Through working on something that mattered just to me, audience of one, I began to find stories that mattered to many, many more people.
That's
Yeah.
great.
I was gonna say, I would argue that your writing exercise went really successfully. Like,
it was a weird one. I was like, I'm going to be about these two guys, and they're going to kill themselves in order to get superpowers, and everyone's going to be awful, but not evil, just awful, because the whole thesis is that when you give somebody superpowers, like a real person, you don't make them better, you make them worse, because suddenly they can act on all of their grievances and petty vendettas and all of those things.
And now this writing exercise has become, it's about to be a trilogy, right?
Yes, it will eventually be a trilogy. The books take roughly 5 years. So I write them in the background between other projects, and along the way, they just have a really long, steep time.
Well, and here I'm checking my notes to make sure I say it right. Your big announcement about Extraordinary.
Yeah.
So this is a prequel comic series that happens 5 years before Vicious ever starts?
No, it's a comic series set between Vicious and Vengeful.
Okay.
Those books are set 5 years apart, and so in between those 5 years, the events that happen between those books, that's where the comic is set.
And that comes out next year.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I'm real excited about that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I made a big to read stack for him, and Vengeful is definitely on the top of it.
Good.
All right, next question.
Yeah, so one of our group members, Leanne, isn't able to be here, but she's going to watch later, so she sent us a question in advance. And she wants to know, in the Shades of Magic trilogy, she noticed that each book kind of focuses on a different Antari, and if that was something that you set out to do, or if it's just something that happened organically.
Very few things in my series happen organically, which is to say, the thing I like about writing is the execution. A lot of people like the discovery. They like wandering lost in the woods, and I like the strategy. I'm somebody who will quit very easily if I don't have a game plan. So it's all about, like, what can I do to prevent myself from losing hope and quitting? Because the self-loathing runs high when I deal with imperfection, which is the entire creative process. And so no, I actually plan most aspects of a series quite in advance, and especially like the ending. Like, I know how a book or a series is going to end before I start the first book, because that's kind of what I'm working toward. And the same goes for that kind of thematic focus. I knew that I wanted the lens to shift between these three kind of pillars that are holding up our narrative, mostly also because I didn't want to stick with one person. The entire thesis of this series is there is no chosen one. Right? Like, there's an ensemble that is impacting everything. And I wanted to give each character the chance to have that lens because they all excited me, and I didn't want to bias towards one person.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Of course.
All right, another question. We're having to scroll through them because there are so many comments, people saying, you're my new favorite author, and I love everything that you've written so far. But here, someone said, speaking of villains, can you tell us what it's like to write about these evil or awful characters, but that still have that nuance? So often we see villains that are pure evil without depth or nuance to them.
Yeah, I'm not really interested in those kinds because I don't think they're. The thing is, I mean, I've spent a lot of time thinking about villainy and antagonism and where that line is, but I think the most important thing is accessibility. And when I write heroes, protagonists, villains, antagonists, I'm always looking at the character flaws because we as readers don't actually bond with a character over their successes. We don't see their strengths as our strengths, but we see their weaknesses as our weaknesses. Like, we relate to somebody's jealousy more than we relate to their extreme strength, their fortitude, or like moral goodness. And so what I'm looking at, regardless of the character and their positioning in the narrative of the story, whether it's their story or somebody else's, I'm looking for what they're afraid of, what drives them, like what they want and what they're willing to do to get it. And out of that, I really start to understand the cogs that turn not their personhood, but like their flaws. Like I want to know what makes a person, like where are the cracks in the armor? Like where are the weaknesses? Because that's what I can exploit to have a character do bad things or good things, but really at the heart, self-interested things. So I would say that all of my characters are an exercise in flaws. And it's just that in the villains, I'm really looking at the way to focus that self-interest to such a point that they don't have the thing that keeps Victor from being a villain is that he has Sydney and Mitch.
Yeah.
Without these counterbalances to show us like glimpses of goodness or of like moral balance, Victor goes off the deep end and he becomes hugely unrelatable. And what's nice about him is that those little moments where he's even in denial to himself about the fact he's protecting Sydney or Mitch, but he's still doing it. And so the difference between a villain and a hero are really not even their flaws. It's who they have around them to balance those flaws or to like shore them up. So really though, regardless of who I'm writing, I'm just trying to figure out what makes them tick, but specifically anchored towards their negative traits.
I like it.
Very good.
Villains don't know they're villains.
This is the first question to pop up in the feed for me. This is from Dan Lafferty. One of my favorite things in Vicious was blacking out parts of the parents' books with marker. Is that something is that something you or someone you know did, or were you thinking of any particular books you wrote that when you wrote that part? Sorry, I can't read.
You know, it's really interesting. Every now and then I get a character detail that is just the right detail. And I really do, talking about specificity earlier and universality, I look for those tiny details because I think we can extrapolate a lot of a person's identity and philosophy from a small detail. It's the same way that I world build. Like I'm never going to paint you all of London, but I'm going to paint you a few intimate pieces from which you can extrapolate everything you don't see. And I'm the same with characters. And I don't even remember what it was that brought me that tiny detail of Victor's that became so fundamental. But I liked it because it was the first humanizing detail of his I figured out, right? It was because he's a really like borderline sociopathic, highly analytical mind. And this is such a small artistic weakness. Like this is such a petty grievance of his that he like does this, and it stems from a place, and really it becomes a really large thematic element if you think about it, because Victor's obsession is controlling the narrative. He wants to literally write over other people's narratives. He wants to be the one in absolute control of the story. And that is such a, like, as writers, we are tiny gods, right? We are controlling the narratives. And I kind of made Victor the tiny god of his own world in that sense. I made him the writer. I made him somebody who felt like this was a measure of control. But yeah, I didn't really know at the time. I'd seen blackout poetry, but I wasn't even thinking of that. I wanted to give Victor something destructive, but intimate.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so visceral of an image too. It's really fun to picture.
Very specific.
So Julie Turner Wheeler asks, this is a fun one. What would you want your extraordinary ability to be?
Oh, I think about this all the time because really, like everything that I'm doing, whether I'm writing magic systems or superpowers, I'm always thinking about like what that extraordinary component is. But if I had to have like an EO style superpower, I would want the ability to manipulate time, but only moving forward. So if you look at all time travel based problems, they come with the trying to go back. Like you can't go back. You can't go back because you either create paradoxes or you just mess with it, or you find that you've like gotten stuck, or you mess up the whole future. And really what I want more in life is time, not to go back and reverse anything. I just want to slow down. Like my next book, Addie LaRue, is all about this desire to slow down, like to like feel like the world is passing you by. So I want to manipulate time, but only moving forward, meaning I want to be able to pause, slow down, or speed up any moment. And I feel like then I would be able to just like pause for a year and read all of the books, or speed up through a particularly awful day and then slow down and savor a moment that's going too fast.
That sounds awesome.
How would you get that ability in the world of Vicious?
I think about it a lot. Because usually, so the powers in Vicious stem from circumstance and psychology. meaning that like there has to be like my last thoughts would have to be something about not being ready, right? About not being ready to let go, about not wanting to be over yet. But yeah, if I could control it, because I don't trust myself, if I could also go back, I think that would mess up everything though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good power. I was thinking like the ability to eat as much as I want. That'd be like,
That would be a
It
good
takes
one.
all kinds of powers to run the world.
I can't help you, but I can eat a lot of Cheez-Its.
Exactly.
All right, next.
Excellent. So Abbott Jones asks, your female characters are so strong and real and their own people. Is it easy for you to avoid the usual tropes and arcs for women/girls, or is it something you actively work against while writing?
No, it's not something I have to actively work against it in that I'm aware of the tropes, but I mean, the female characters that I write are mirrors and models for myself. So it was really interesting actually, and because people will see it when they read Vengeful if they choose to, but essentially I wrote Lila Bard in Darker Shade of Magic, and Lila Bard was who I wrote her when I was 27 and I needed her. Like I don't have a really strong attachment to my gender, and I was figuring out my sexuality at the time, and like I just wanted somebody to be everything that I wanted to be, right? Her relationship to fear, her recklessness, like she was just an aspirational character. And it was interesting because I got a lot of blowback from her because I wasn't trying to equate strength with an absence of femininity. It was just for me, I wanted this particular kind of strength for myself, not as a projection to all female readers or male readers or any readers that this is what strength is. Because oftentimes in media, like strength is defeminized, right? Like women have to be strong by being less women, by being less female. And so as an answer to that, I wrote a character named Marcella Riggins, who is the lead villain in Vengeful.
Yes.
And I made her the embodiment of female rage. She is highly feminine. Her power is highly feminine. She owns every aspect of her femininity. And she is essentially a direct reaction to microaggressions. Like at one point, she incinerates somebody for not letting her finish her sentence. And it seems petty to say out of context, but she's just like, she gets her power in the opening chapter when her husband cheats on her and then tries to burn her down inside their house. And it doesn't work, obviously. And she's just rage incarnate. And so I think that those two characters provide really lovely kind of pillars of my identity. But yeah, I'm never actively having to push against like classic representations of women because I've never been a classic representation of a woman. And so I'm really just trying to create models for myself, and everything I write, I'm writing for an age of myself. So when I was 30 when I wrote Marcella, and I was 27 when I wrote Lila Bard, and I was 25 when I wrote Serena Clark. And I think you can see the different manifestations coming out as I'm growing and exploring my own identity.
Wow, well, I love that. And also, I read Vengeful and loved it. I think I might have liked it more than Vicious, actually. And Marcella is a big part of the reason why. She's such a great character.
I will tell you, that year, because that was 2018 when I wrote that book, and it was just such a hellfire in so many ways. And I was just feeling even more upset with the world than previously. And it was extraordinarily cathartic to write a character like Marcella Riggins, who just like didn't care. I mean, she's the embodiment of hell hath no fury. And like, I like loved writing her scenes more than I have ever loved writing a character.
Huh.
That's awesome.
So I was going to be good and pull a question from the comments for the next one, but I feel like my own question that I had for you ties into what we were just discussing. So my personal question actually that I had wanted to ask was something that I've noticed, and like I said, I haven't read all of your works. I'm getting to it. I'm working through them. But something that I've really appreciated that I've encountered in a lot of other sci-fi and fantasy books is that the romance is never forced. Something that really bugs me, and I can be really enjoying a story, but quite often it feels like romance is being inserted into a story literally just to tick off a sexual content box, and it doesn't feel organic. It feels very unnecessary, and I feel like everything that you do is integral to the plot, which as a reader, I really appreciate that. And so I wonder, just, is that something that you do with intention?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing, right? Romance is great. It's wonderful in context. But like I think a lot of my stories and my relationship to romance in my stories stems from the fact that there are so many incredible kinds of relationships to write about. There are parent-child and siblings and adversaries and friends and allies and so many amazing things that always get immediately demoted when you introduce romance. For some reason, when romance exists in a story, romance has to be the A storyline. And for me, I love romance when it's in context or when it comes as like the product of victory for the story. But like the relationship between Victor and Eli, or the relationship between Lila and a character that you meet in Gathering of Shadows, a pirate captain named Alucard Emery, like these friendships and these villainies and these adversaries, like or Serena and Sydney, like I love those relationships. I just don't want to downgrade them just because romance for some reason always has to get top billing.
Thank you. I just like, as a reader, and I know not the only one, but just it seems to like often be the case that it's like a story feels like it has to have a romantic plot, and it feels unnecessary. Yes.
But also, and you know what, there's so many readers who want that, and that's amazing, and there's so many books for them. I'm just somebody for whom like romance excites me less than hate mans or like a murder. Like I just want to see tension. I like tension, and I just want I like it when it's organic, and I love the lust. Like that's the thing, right? I love the lust and I hate the love. Like I get bored by love. And it's not that I don't think it has a place in stories, but I do always think it's kind of funny when like the world is falling down and they just stop to make out. Like I'm like, the world is falling down. Like priorities here. Priorities. And it's also just like I'm not a terribly sexual person. Like it's just the romantic element to me is just the least interesting one. So I'm writing the stories, like I'm playing my tiny god, so I give them more space over to like the relationships that interest me most.
That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's very appreciated.
I always wondered that too. It's like, why are y'all kissing? Like you're covered in blood. Like you just killed zombies. And like you probably smell and taste bad. Like.
Also, and up until that point, there was like zero indication that these characters had romantic feelings towards one another, and now all of a sudden they're having an intimate scene, and I was like,
I do think you bring up a really good point, though, and I do think part of it, perhaps, is that my stories tend to take place over a short window of time, and I think that one of my biggest grievances is when relationships feel really rushed, right? And so I think that's one of the things is I don't feel like you can get to love. I do love a slow burn. I will slow burn multiple characters in Shades of Magic, and I will I will play with them in that way because I do love it, but I think it's earned. I don't like it when it feels like you guys have known each other for 3 days. Like, why are you suddenly like sacrificing yourselves for each other? I don't buy it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this is another softball, but I always love to ask any author that we bring on just so we can kind of get to know you. We're big geeks, and I always love to know, say it's, late night on a Saturday night, what do you geek out about? Like if you were on a fan forum, or like what's V's favorite like hobby or niche thing that you're like so into that people may not know about?
I mean, like I grew up on the anime and manga scene. Like I came up through old school anime. Like for anybody who is like watching that is a fan of anime, like Vicious is a love letter to Cowboy Bebop. Like down to the character personas. Like I love it. I love binge watching an anime. I love like going down weird little rabbit holes of Marvel and DC. Like I like nerd culture. It's interesting. I'm not sure right now. Like if you'd asked me 5 years ago, it would have been Doctor Who, but I was like a Tennant fan, and then I had like a little falling out with Doctor Who because Moffat, I was like not happy with how he wrote episodes, but like Russell T Davies is amazing. Like I am very passionate about small bites of things. I don't think I have a fandom that I belong to in the way that like it consumes my waking moments, but I become all consumed by things for a short window of time.
Gotcha.
So I'm like somebody who flits from scene to scene and is enamored with that thing while I'm part of it. But then there's so many things I want to consume that I like have to keep moving. And maybe like the streaming culture and everything has spoiled me in that way, right? Because I can have everything. So like while I'm watching Supernatural, it's all I can think about. And then like while I'm watching My Hero Academia, it's all I can think about. And like all of these things become consuming to me, but nothing I guess like scratches that itch in like the long-term way. And you look, for a very long time it was Harry Potter, and like I don't feel like that's not a pure joy for me anymore for many reasons. It's been very ruined, but like it's hard because I was 11 when the first book came out, and for years and years and years, like those books define my teenage self. I don't know, I don't have like a late night forum geek. Again, it depends on the year. Depends on the year. Like I'll be in it for like, you know, Lucifer or Umbrella Academy this week, you know. But like right now, I'm obsessed over one thing at a time. And right now, my biggest obsession in this whole damn world is a reality TV show called Alone, where they drop 10 people alone with only like their own video camera in the middle of the wilderness, and they see how long they can survive. And the last person standing wins $500,000. And it is the most intense, emotional, and fascinating show. So it's all essentially video diary for each of the contestants. They are like building houses. So the new season is in the Arctic. They dropped them. They are like, and like the last season I watched, they lasted 87 days.
Wow.
So it is the most insane show. It's also ruined me for all other reality television because everything now is so like forced drama. And then I watched this, and he's like, the dude caught a wolverine in the last episode. Like he caught a wolverine, and like it's fascinating. I've never been a survivalist, but I guess that's the thing, right? I'm sorry, I'm so rambling tonight.
No, it's great. We love this. Is what we love.
Learning something from the thing I'm obsessed with, right? Like I love learning. And I think the thing I like about the show is like you learn survival skills through these people in all these episodes. It's kind of the same way I love memoir, in that like as a writer, you're being given a narrative bite. Like I'm being given a narrative glimpse into somebody's life.
Yeah, and now you can catch a wolverine. So all.
Oh my god! Or at least make a snare trap. There's all these things I had never thought of before.
That sounds way more useful than all the things that I've learned from watching Nailed It. Although I have definitely learned things from watching Nailed It.
I watch Nailed It compulsively. I have no shame about it. I watch Worst Cooks in America, but this is because I'm living with my parents as a 33-year-old. Like I have found myself in an environment that I did not plan to spend this year.
Right.
See, we'll never forget to butter a pan now, will we? No.
Oh my god, ever.
Yeah, I would.
Brown food tastes good.
I would catch pneumonia. I'd be out in 87 seconds. But,
oh my god.
Okay, so this next question is from Adam Massey on Facebook. He asks, when writing, do you have a conversation with your characters, or do they tell you how they want to be written?
No. As I said, I am the god. Like, and that's a really weird, again, it would be narcissistic in any other context, but no, I don't really give my characters free reign in that way. So the way I construct my characters, as I said, is I build them like little snowmen out of their wants and their fears. I then figure out who they are on the last page of the book. Who are they going to be when we leave them, right? And once I find that person, I rewind them to figure out who they are when we first meet them. So like I knew who Lila Bard was going to be at the end of the Shades trilogy, so that I could rewind her and figure out, okay, so how is she incomplete? What is she lacking? Who is she? More naive, more reckless, more for Lila, it was she had no one she cared about, right? Like no ties when we first meet her in A Darker Shade of Magic. So because I'm constructing characters based on where they end up, and 20 books in, my endings have never changed. So it's the one thing that I feel I approach with the utmost confidence, in that I don't start writing the book until I love the ending. Because I feel like endings, to bring it back to the meal metaphor, are like, it's the taste left in your mouth. Like the ending is what you walk away with. Nothing breaks my heart more than investing 600 pages and the ending being like, So I start from the ending, and because I start from the ending of the character as well as the story, I generally know who they're going to be and how they're going to speak and what they're going to do and how they're going to grow.
Right.
Nice.
That might be a boring answer.
No.
That's a super interesting answer, because I feel like we've spoken to a couple of different authors now, and I feel like this is actually a really interesting new perspective, because I feel like a lot of other authors traditionally say, you know, someone evolves like as they write them. And for you to come back and be like, no, start with the final product
I'm
first.
controlling.
Like that's no, I
also
dig it.
I think it's like this. The reason I have this little like Instagram show, No Right Way, is because I will fight with my friends, my other author friends, because the way they do things, I'm like, you're crazy. Like Holly Black plans nothing, and I'm like, you're crazy. Like you're absolutely insane. I cannot do this way. But I mean, I think the thing that people should take away from this is that there genuinely is no right way to do any of it. Like I just personally lose hope when I have to rewrite massive swatches of my book. So I don't want to wander in the wrong direction for 50 pages because I might lose those 50 pages. And because of my schedules, I don't want to lose those 50 pages because suddenly I'm a month behind on like multiple things then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I get that.
Great. Scott McClellan asks, well, first of all, I think all of us are loving the term hate manses.
So much. Everyone in the comments is like, yes.
It's addictive. I come from anime. The anime is full of the hate.
Well, and that's probably part of the answer to this question. Scott asks, are there any classic hate manses that have inspired you?
I mean, everything I love. I'm like looking for seriously, everything I love, I'm looking for the relationship between the hero and the villain. If we want to talk about romance in a novel and we want to talk about attraction, the most powerful attraction repulsion mechanism in a novel should be between the hero and the villain. It should not. If those are also happen to be love interests, that's fine. But like for me, the gears that actually move a narrative in an exciting way is the tension because it's really a foil system, right? I'm looking at like that push-pull. So of course my mind is going completely neurotically blank because I am so bad at pulling examples. But no, I just love the dynamic. And I think that we have to get out of really black and white thinking about the way that dynamic functions and really push ourselves to be like, okay, so really all we need is the perpendicular, right? The interests are at odds. You are in the way of my interest. I am in the way of your interest. You have to get it. One of us has to move.
Mm.
Yeah,
Nice.
I like that too. Yeah.
Sorry, I was swallowing my sweet tea.
Sweet tea.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're in Alabama. Come on. Okay. Here's interesting. Here's a question from book club member Martin Sims. He said, have you ever, and I now realize that this might not go along with what your writing process has been, but maybe you've been surprised at some point. Have you ever created a character or started to, I'm assuming, like mentally piece someone together and then decided to pull that character out and put them into a different universe?
Ooh, that's an amazing question.
Like if maybe they fit somewhere else better.
Also, Martin, you nailed it.
I'm not really a kitchen sink writer. So kitchen sink writer puts too much into one story and then if they're smart needs to pull a few pieces out and save them for a different story. I think part of the reason this has applied less to me is because I genuinely don't let myself put pen to paper until I have planned and I have a good sense of my cast as well as my story. Sometimes the only time, you know what it is? The only time I'm ever truly surprised by my novels is by a tertiary character. Like not even a secondary character. Like we have our main cast, we have our secondary cast. All of a sudden, like a little tertiary, someone who's only supposed to exist for a page, 2 pages, comes in and like I can't get rid of them. So like Ned Tuttle, who's the guy at the beginning of A Darker Shade of Magic, the young human who desperately wants to be a magician.
Right.
Was meant to exist for 1 page and 1 page only. He comes back across all 3 books. Like he is integral. I couldn't get rid of him. Like it was the weirdest thing. I just was like, oh no, I like you. So it's not that I've ever wanted to really pull characters out. The one time something like that has happened is the very, very first novel I ever wrote when I was in college did not get published. It was terrible. I had never written a book before. Your first writing experience of novels should be really terrible because you should be like cutting your teeth. But like 15 years later, I came back to the crux of that story and the main girl, and I excavated her and I put her into a new story. And that story became my middle grade series, City of Ghosts. So like, nothing is ever dead, but sometimes it needs to be composted.
That's a good way to put it.
I love a metaphor, you guys. I have a problem.
No,
I sometimes
no.
try to see how many different metaphors I can put into a single chat.
We're kind of a fan of puns. I don't know if you noticed
Yeah,
that.
we're big puns. Here's one that I think a lot of people may want to know from Bobby. How did you come up with the creepy Dane twins?
Oh my god. Okay, I really wanted to write sadists. Like I just really I like my characters tend to be such masochists. No, and then like I was coming off of Vicious, where my whole argument is like nobody is holistically evil or holistically good. And then I thought, you know, I spent this whole time writing Vicious trying to find the humanity in bad people. And I think I then came out of it wanting to write somebody who is really fun to hate. And the thing about like, there are a lot of redemption arcs in my books. Like I almost spoiled one, but like if you continue forward in Shades of Magic, there's a massive, very, very important redemption arc of a villain. I'm not gonna say who it is, but you can probably guess. Anyway, because they're an Antari, and I didn't want that for the Dane twins. I was like, what if we like got to love to hate someone? Because rather than trying to convince you to love them, there is a really special place for love to hate. I didn't want to go full anarchy a la like the Joker in Batman, right? It couldn't just be a counterbalance in that way. But I thought like, this is going to be so weird. I probably shouldn't admit this. Something that I learned from the success of Vicious is that we as readers enjoy a bit of sadism, meaning we like to act out through characters, and sometimes we receive a bit of emotional euphoria from that action. People really liked it in Vicious and in Vengeful. There's a vivisection scene in Vengeful, but in Vicious, people liked it when characters got to act out on each other. And I wanted to test that a little bit because like I saw this I like a bit of sadism in my fiction, but like I got to test the sadomasochistic urge of the reader against the Dane twins by putting an actual sadist in there in Athos. And it was really interesting because like the original like working title, meaning the fake title for it, was Pirates, Thieves, and Sadist Kings. And that was like my little subtitle. And my publisher was like, absolutely not. And I was like, but there is a sadist in there and I feel like we should talk about it. No, I just kind of thought it also really was part and parcel of Holland's arc and understanding Holland's like the chains of Holland's deal. I really needed somebody that we did not have to redeem.
Yeah.
And we didn't have to redeem them because they were crazy.
Oh, they're like fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Like,
No, you can't. It's rated R.
But like you said,
Okay.
super fun to read.
Oh, and so much fun to write. Like really probably too much fun, and I should assess that personally, but like very fun to write.
So you were talking about, you know, the relationship between the hero and the villain, and that got me thinking about something that I wanted to bring up, but you kind of already mentioned it, that I noticed having read Vicious and A Darker Shade of Magic is that you have in both of those the unity of opposites, right? So it's like in Vicious, especially with Eli and Victor. I mean, that's basically like the crux of the whole story. But even in A Darker Shade, you have Kel and Holland, and so you really play up that like, you know, relationship between the two, and this sort of the unity of opposites is this like Aristotle thing where it says like, you know, you want the opposite thing so bad that like one of you is not going to make it. So, like it's the Transformers thing.
Well, and it's also, I mean, I love that. I love that comparison. I love that thought because I think that's really apt. I also think, though, you have to remember that my opposites are never actually opposites. They are opposite circumstances to the same identity. So, like, the thing about Victor and Eli is they're the same person with one slight manifestational difference. One, for Eli, is religion. And with Kel and Holland, their opposition, like their circumstantial difference is which London they were from. And it's very important to the narrative, both from Holland's perspective of justification and from Kel's of privilege, that like Kel comes to understand that so much of his identity is born out of the privilege of being in Red London, that like he would have been used very differently had he been in White London. And really like that's the separation between the two men, is simply luck. And so I want to always keep my foils, my hero and my villain, in very close psychological proximity to each other. And that's like what draws Victor and Eli together. That is what pushes Kel and Holland apart.
Yeah, and that's awesome.
Yeah, it makes it very interesting.
It does.
Yeah.
It's like
I think a lot about it. I cleave them like they're kind of crafted from the same block of
It's
wood.
like
they're always cut out of the same
an
block.
experiment in nature versus nurture.
Exactly. I like to build people. So this is like my best example of this is that Sydney Clark in Vicious has the exact same near-death experience as the main character in my middle grade series. They're the same age, very similar description, and I fed them through different like Rube Goldberg machines of like the world building. So like basically I took the same person and I said like, how would you do in this world? And like how, and then I'll put you over here. And like I then ran them through the machines, and what you get are two completely different girls.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome.
Interesting. I just envisioned the author's Rube Goldberg now.
It's a messy place. It's a messy place.
So Abbott Jones asks, the magic systems in each of your worlds are so different and fully realized. How do you make something so fantastical feel so grounded and plausible?
I love that. Thank you, first of all. It's very flattering. Nature. Every single thing I do is tied to nature. So like in Vicious, I needed to tie it as closely to medicine as possible. I wanted to feel as grounded as possible. This is how I knew I had done it well. About a year after the book came out, I got an email. It was like 3 a.m. I do not know the exact demographic of the emailer, except that they were male, but I'm going to guess like fully grown white male, somewhere between 30 and 60. They had clearly been lying awake at night because this email came in at like 3, 4 in the morning. And the email was like, hey, like, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I've been doing some Googling and I just want to make sure. Like, this is not a recognized phenomenon, correct? Like, he was like lying awake being like, this isn't a thing, but obviously something that I did made him doubt it enough to ask. And that's what I love, because my goal is to, whether I'm building superpowers off of medical science and like the known weirdness that comes with temporary adrenal responses under crisis, or whether I'm building whole systems of magic, I want to start them from a place of absolute logic. And the natural world follows logic. That's why I chose elemental magic, because like I loved it from Avatar and from Full Metal Alchemist, but like what I think works about it and about alchemy then is this idea of transmutation as a natural principle. And so I find that I can make my systems really complicated if I grow them from very simple roots. And I want my magical systems to always feel super accessible. Comes back to me and hating maps and glossaries. Like, I just want everything to feel intuitive, because the less time you as a reader spend trying to figure out how it works, the more time you're engrossed in the story.
Yeah. I have to say, just as an aside, as a novice reader, but I have read 16 books in the past 16 months. Like that's what I really love about your writing is you're right into it. Like it's like opening up a movie, and Adam's talked about too. By the way, Adam would love to direct either of
Yeah,
these
I can do
films.
that.
Is I can visualize everything, and I mean everything else is great, but like it's right into it, and you don't need a lot of that other stuff, like you said.
Bringing it back to anime, this is the rule of the anime school of world building. You learn what you need to know as you need to know it. So like, it's a very immersive. If you go and you watch an anime, the first episode is always really actiony, but also confusing as hell, because they're not going to like prologue you. They like almost never give you anything except what you need to know to begin the journey. And I think contextual world building is so important, because I get bored really easily. And I want you to learn a lot of things, and you need to learn a lot of things, but you are learning them through the perspectives of the characters. And by giving you someone like Kel and Lila, an insider and an outsider, you get two sets of eyes that can learn things that the others wouldn't notice. And then you can piece together what you need to know from there.
Awesome.
I can attest to that, because our daughter is super into My Hero Academia, like has the uniform and everything, and we've also done makeup tutorials, and it's a whole thing. But she'll like want to tell me about this really exciting thing that's happening in the storyline, and I'm like, but you have to tell me, but who is this person? Hold on. And all of a sudden it's been 2 hours. She's like,
he's got grenades on his hand, and there's a frog girl, and I'm like,
oh, you know.
Yes, it's a lot. It's a lot, but it's worth it.
No, it's so awesome. She's very much addicted to
I've
everything.
never loved such a wholesome show. It's very confusing for me.
Although she definitely did want to watch another one recently that I had to Google, and I was like, that one's less wholesome. You have to wait until you're older. Sorry, bye. She's 13. It's not yet. So is it my turn? I'm
Yes,
so sorry.
it's your turn.
Okay. Here's a fun comment. It's actually not a question, but I'll ask a question after. A book club member said, there's a Bethany in Vengeful who, quote, has more tits than thoughts. I've never come across a good Bethany in literature. This was a comment made from one of our book club members named Bethany, by the way.
I'm sorry.
But no, it was
a
a
Bethany
laughing
into my
emoji.
book, and she's also not very nice. I'm sorry. I don't know why we do this. We do this for Rachel's and Bethany's for some reason in fiction. There's a list, and I'm very sorry. I also tend to always put a Harker in every one of my books. I'm not sure why. I don't think I've done it in these yet, though, so that's probably a good sign.
So I'm going to say, hey, book club member Bethany, we all dig you. So look, we found
Yeah.
one.
I'm
There's
sure they're great. I'm sure you're a great Bethany. I'm sure you're a great person, Bethany's or otherwise.
As for a comment, though, we have someone, and this actually, they asked Lev Grossman this when we did a Q&A with him. But they're saying, inspired by the gray and red London contrast, where in your own life do you find magical moments juxtaposed with the mundane?
I mean, the first time I ever visited London, I was 11. And it was the first time I saw history in living motion. Like, the thing about London is you can round a corner and lose 100 years. Like, it's history piled on top of each other in a way that makes you believe in magic. I live in Scotland. If you don't believe in magic after visiting Scotland, like, nothing will ever convince you. It is one of the most surreal and ancient places. I'm also pagan, so I think that means I might be like slightly more receptive to the idea of the powers of the natural world. But no, I mean, I encounter magic on the daily. Like, here's the thing though, I don't encounter magic like in the way that it's used in Red London, but I'm here in France and my parents have a vegetable garden. And like over the last 3 months, I've gotten to watch something grow from nothing into something and then pick it with my hand and eat it. And that to me is the simplest form of magic, right? You literally are combining elements into something new. And I think one of the things that it takes to be a whimsical fantasy writer is a willingness to look around you and believe that there is something more to the world than what you see. And a lot of my books deal with this concept of the magic is sat right up on or against the mundane. And the idea is that the magic is there. You might simply not know how to access it. You might simply not have found the doorway in, but it's always there. And I think looking back at some of my like very influential writers growing up, like Neil Gaiman, always played with the proximity of the magical and the mundane. I never could get into Tolkien because I didn't like that I could never access that world. Like, the only way I could access that world was through the pages of a book. But like, Hogwarts was on a train. Like, all you had to do was get on a train. Like, the idea of you need to round the right corner, you need to open the right door, and you can move between the mundane and the magical has always had immense appeal to me.
I love that.
So kind of speaking to that, I forget who asked this, so I can't attribute that, and I'm sorry right now. But we've gotten a couple comments and questions about how do you think the world today, and you being locked down in France during COVID times, do you think that's going to play, or has it already played into your inspiration for writing in the future?
I mean, I don't know. I guess you'll have to ask me in like 5 years if it did in the past, because that's the thing, right? Is like, authors, we're working 2 to 3 years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's impacting my energies and my focus and my levels of creativity more than it's impacting the stories themselves. If I were a sci-fi writer, maybe, but I'm already dealing with a point of departure.
Right.
So, like, I'm not a futurist, and I'm not somebody who plays in the game of prediction within fiction. I'm really like writing something that's parallel to the present instead of, and usually slightly in the past. I kind of like the timelessness of that. I can't say never, because like maybe I won't like have people touching, you know, but also, I don't know. I think it's definitely impacted my own creative energy and headspace as a writer, but it hasn't necessarily impacted thematically into my work yet.
Okay.
Totally fair, because we're like still very much
We're
living
in
in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're in it.
It's still here a lot.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere more for you than it is for me, but like, because I'm in France, but for 2 months, I wasn't allowed to travel more than a kilometer from my
Wow.
house,
Yeah.
like on foot, and I had to have papers with me. Like, it's a surreal year. Also, I have a book coming out this fall, and I was supposed to go on like a massive international tour and have like some experiences for the very first time in my 18 book long career, and like, that's the smallest problem on the scale of the world right now.
And of course, I'm going to interject really quick. I know it's Adam's turn to ask a question, but I was going to say, your book that's coming out this fall, you're talking about The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue.
Yeah, hold on.
Oh, she's got it.
Yeah.
I can put a cover on the screen.
Nice.
Yeah. There you go.
Because everybody in the club is talking about it, because obviously we're all super excited.
Please buy it, because
Yes.
I genuinely don't. I worked on this book for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Is this a good time to tell you? I already pre-ordered it. That's okay.
Oh, no, that's fine.
I started it when I was 22. Now I'm 33.
I know I love pre-ordering books because then you have like stuff to look.
It's a gift to future you.
I need stuff to look forward to. Like, I don't function well without something to look forward to. So I tend to pre-order at least 6 months in advance. So then I have like a calendar of when books are coming.
Pre-orders are a very weird thing, and I understand like times are hard for everyone right now. So I always even feel guilty being like, please find some way to support your authors. But also, it's tricky and it's hard, but anytime anyone is capable of pre-ordering, those metrics like impact the publisher and their excitement and enthusiasm, and translates directly in towards the investment in the author. And also just like, I'm really proud of this book.
I justify it really easily. I'm like, this was like 3 cheeseburgers. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'll skip
Exactly.
3 cheeseburgers and I got a book.
And I will say, during quarantine times, in our Facebook group, the Literarily Wasted Lounge,
Which I love that
we
title.
have been buying books. Don't worry, any authors out there.
We're
There
all
have
quite
been
literally wasted.
Yeah, we've-
Yes.
Oh, I've been buying I have my Kindle here with me, and then all of these books up here came from Book Depository because I'm in France right now, and I apparently just like can't. I need to hold them close to myself at all times.
Yeah, we've got people in the audience that are saying, "Oh, we know you have a book coming out." They're on it. They're ready. So I wanted to ask you a question and shift gears a little bit, because you are such an open book online. Ha ha ha, open book. On your Instagram and on Twitter, and you do a lot of talking to people, talking to your fans about the process and about writing, and you get into things like insecurities about being creative and things like that, which I love that you do, because I suffer from all of those things. So I just want to know like where that came from, and why you want to do that.
I started really young, as I've mentioned, and when I started, so I sold my first book when I was 22, and publishing, and especially like the publishing community online at the time, the book community, the writing community, was so opaque that really all you saw from authors was celebration, right? Anytime they had good news to share. Even when they didn't have good news to share, they would try and make it sound like good news. There was this huge aversion to honesty and transparency. And I felt that for several years in my career. And I'll never forget, I went to a writer's retreat the year that my debut novel came out in 2011. And all everyone was doing was sitting around bitching. Like, everyone was sitting around talking about how hard it was. And I kept thinking to myself, why are you not talking about this, though, like, publicly? Because I feel so lonely and so doubtful all the time, because I'm sitting here trying to work as like a baby author with almost no support, like barely scraping by for those first few books. And like, when all I see are other authors celebrating, then it makes me feel like I'm failing. It makes me feel like they must not be struggling. And therefore my struggle becomes a reflection of my own abilities instead of the fact that it's hard. And so I made a decision with Vicious, really from Vicious on, because Vicious was like my screw it moment. Vicious was like, I'm gonna write what I want to write. And it worked. And I started to gain more audience. And from there on, I decided, because I knew I had a lot of aspiring writers looking at me with my platform, that I was just going to be really honest. I was going to be honest about the days where it was good and the days where it wasn't. I was going to be as honest as I could about creative hardship and about like the psychology. and how like you kind of have to trick your brain. And maybe some people don't. Like, look, I think John Scalzi sits down and he writes 2,000 words and it's perfect, whatever. But like we've talked about it. I give him hell for it all the time. But like for me, writing a book is truly like a Sisyphean task. It feels like rolling boulders up hills. It is truly, I love the idea and I love it when it's done. And everything in between is an exercise in me trying not to quit. Like I have such a difficulty with self-loathing and imperfection that like 18 books, 20 books in now, I guess, my inability to write a perfect first draft is the bane of my existence. Like it feels unfair at this point that I can't do it right the first time, right? So all of that came just from me not wanting anyone else to feel as lonely and as alienated as I felt from the creative process, because the fact is that doesn't go away when you start publishing. Like you don't suddenly feel secure. Your neuroses get replaced with different neuroses. Like you just adjust. It's truly creative industries are industries where you just shift the bar. And so I felt like I can't get rid of these neuroses for anyone. I can't even get rid of these neuroses for myself, but maybe I can make somebody feel a little bit less alone to know that like a successful author is suffering getting those 500 words down or suffering with their own headspace, or like just having a bad day and had to delete everything, and you're still valid. Like your creative enterprise is still valid. The only way you're not going to get through this is if you quit. Like if, as long as you stay in it, the odds are you're going to find a way through it. The only way you don't is by opting out. So I just wanted other people not to opt out.
I can say,
That's awesome.
Speaking for myself, thank you for doing that, because I need those feelings validated. And there's people chiming in the comments that are also thanking you for doing that, because I know, what you're saying for me, like there are times where when I need to come up with a video idea or something like that, I won't even put it down unless it's already like perfect in my head. Like you said, the first draft thing, can't do it. So
anyone that needs to see my neuroses can like do a Twitter search. I'm not really on Twitter these days. I'm on Instagram for like mental health, but like, because boundaries are important. But you can do a Twitter search to the number of times that I have said, quote, some version of, F this, I'm going to move to Iceland and raise goats. Because I was trying to like, you hit a point where you're like, my favorite thing to do as a writer is that twice a year, my parents get a large delivery of wood. And it is my job to chop it and stack it. It takes 5 to 6 hours. I end up physically exhausted, and it is a direct correlation between effort in, product out. The exact opposite of writing. And so like, sometimes I just want to feel fulfilled. And so I feel like how much I hold on to that like 2 days a year is an indicator of how complicated the fulfillment process is the other 364 days. So you're not alone.
Well, that's great. And for those of you who don't follow her on Instagram, Twitter, you can plug yourself. I think we maybe have time for like one more question, and then you can do all your plugs. And
sorry, I'm a ram.
No,
it's beautiful.
I do really quick just want to say we're getting feedback from multiple club members who are just saying how thankful they are for your honesty and that they admire how open you are with all of your audience, and they appreciate that.
Thank you.
So for this last question, Joe asked, what does your day-to-day routine look like as an author? He knows some people who are really strict with their routine and others not so much.
So I have a thing.
You just posted that on Instagram, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is how anal I am. Okay. So I have a like calendar. You can see it's like a habit tracker.
This is amazing.
So here's the thing. On this habit tracker is not just writing. I have reading, writing, journaling, yoga, cardio, strength, violin, admin, and health. It is not a goal ever for me to black out every single one on every single day. I suffer from like anxiety and depression. And I feel like even before COVID, it's really easy for days and time to blur. You look up and like you've lost a week or you've lost a month. And so what this does is this prevents me from ever losing more than one day. Because every single day is its own column, meaning, and then these are work sprints. So I track time, not word count, because I will work 6 hours some days and have 100 words. And some days I'll work an hour and have 1,000. And those days are just as important. As I posted today, like writing is writing, but thinking is writing, and editing is writing, and deleting is, it's all writing. But my goal is, one, to have balance, like physical health, physical fitness is so important to my own mental health. So I make that there. I have something that is completely independent of writing, which for me this year is violin, which I took up in January, and I love it because I'm terrible at it, and it's not my job to be good at it. So I'm like getting marginally better every day. But no, for me, it's about finding balance. I do most of my writing in the morning simply because if I don't start writing until the afternoon, I will not write. It's so easy for me to be like, I'll try again tomorrow. But the point is with something like this, even if I have a bad day, like every single day is a fresh start. So like the worst case is I'm having a really terrible writing day. And so I switch to self-care and I focus on physical fitness and reading and admin and everything else that day. I try to write most days. And by that, I mean, even if it's like today was kind of a day off for me, but I had some world building work I needed to do for the book I'm writing right now. And so I just spent an hour like brainstorming. Like I didn't have to put words on paper. I didn't really have to count a word count. I didn't have to measure progress. I just needed to spend some time with the book. And I always say that's like keeping the creative door propped open in your head. I need to keep the creative door propped open so it's easier to walk through. But like, yeah, I try and just do something towards that every day.
That's amazing. And Joe, the guy who asked the question,
get one
he
of
says,
those.
that's actually really reassuring. Love it. And I think Christy saw your thing and was just like, yes.
Yeah.
She loves it.
Yeah.
I love charts.
It's addictive. It's like this is my new month now. Just started,
Nice.
but like it's going well. And I draw it out. This is just like it's not even a proper bullet journal. It's just a dot grid. And then I just draw out the grid, which is like its own little Zen process.
Yeah.
Right.
I was about to say, if you like had some of those, because I've seen a lot of your creative stuff, people always ask for things like in your handwriting and like creative input. I know for a fact if you sold some notebooks like that on your website,
This is Christy's.
I would buy one.
Oh my God.
I'm a big bullet journaler, and I love habit trackers. So
Well, here's what I love is I tried bullet journaling for a month. I ditched everything except the habit tracker because it's about what works for you. And the rest I didn't serve me personally because I was getting way too neurotic. Like, well, I drew the A wrong in August. I have to start again. And so like, I just really wanted the like brutal daily accountability.
Well,
And
Is that
also
something-
a cheater. I'm a cheater. Like I cycle and read at the same
that's
time.
not
I'm like gonna get those
that's
like
not
That's
cheating.
not
That's
cheating.
yeah.
That's being super productive. That's like me. I eat all my meals and read at the same time, which
Oh my
actually turns out horribly because my books that I love that I've reread multiple times, some of them have like spaghetti stains in them, which is like really embarrassing, but that's fine.
It's good. It's
well,
good.
All right, we're at the hour marker.
yeah, so
Oh,
before we wrap it
goodness.
up, tell us where we can find you and what we can look forward to from you.
Tell
So-
us everything we need to buy.
Okay, yeah. So the best place to find me right now is on Instagram because I post every day, but I also Instagram story almost every day, and I'll talk a lot about craft and whatever I'm working on. And so Instagram, I'm just VE Schwab, VESCHWAB on there. I'm on Twitter too, but I'm on Twitter hiatus right now, so I don't know if I'm gonna go back. I like left because sanity, and then I feel much better without it. And then I'm like there's a lot of pressure as an author to be everywhere, but I'm not sure I actually want to be everywhere. But in the meantime, in 2 months, my next novel, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, hit shelves. It is the story of a young woman who makes a deal with the devil to live forever and ends up cursed to be forgotten by everyone she meets. And it's about her life over 300 years where the only person who remembers her is the devil.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
And Neil Gaiman just blurbed it, and Naomi Novik just blurbed it, and so I'm
So that has to
really
be
excited. And I
crazy
wrote it
exciting.
over 10 years, so please show it some love. And then also, I'm working on Threads of Power, which is the next books in the Shades of Magic series, and then the Vicious trilogy, book 3, and several things I can't talk about, like a TV show and a movie. But like,
Yeah,
one
saw you
time-
finished them.
Well, we'll talk because I'll
Yeah,
direct it.
yeah.
That's cool. That'd be good. That's all good.
Yeah. Oh man,
If you
Hollywood.
don't pass me in it, I'm going to get you. Adam.
The number of messages that I get.
Oh, I bet.
But yeah, so I'm working on a lot, but honestly, Instagram's the best place to keep track of anything I'm doing.
Well,
I'm
Oh my gosh.
painfully active.
And like we said before, we know that you, like you just told us, you're a crazy busy person.
Yeah.
Juggling so many things. So we really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk
was
to
a joy.
us, to answer questions for our book club members. I know they're all so appreciative. They're telling us all right now. One of them said something about a habit tracker with spaghetti sauce. Oh, that's my fault. But no, they're all very, very thankful that you took the time to come talk to all of us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you all, and thank them. This has been like an absolute joy. I spent the last 3 or 4 months interviewing other people, and I like kind of forgot how to like be interviewed. So
No,
thank
this
you.
was amazing. So thank you so much. And for everybody else, thank you for joining us. This is Victoria V.E. Schwab. Thank you. We'll see y'all next time.
Thank you. That's all we can